Introduction: Transition from Compliance to Agency Relationships. In Chapter 1, we explored the authority of the Arizona Department of Real Estate, the Commissioner's rules, and the professional conduct standards that govern real estate licensees. Those rules establish how licensees must behave in order to protect consumers and maintain professional integrity. Now we transition into one of the most important legal concepts in real estate practice: agency relationships. Agency law governs the relationship between real estate professionals and the clients they represent. Understanding agency is critical because it defines the duties, responsibilities, and legal obligations that arise when a licensee represents a buyer or seller. When agency relationships are created, fiduciary duties begin. These duties require agents to place the interests of their client above their own interests and to act with loyalty, care, and full disclosure. In Arizona, agency relationships are influenced by both common law legal principles and state statutes and administrative rules. This section establishes the legal foundation of agency law and explains how these concepts apply to everyday real estate transactions throughout the Phoenix metropolitan area. A. Definition of agency. Agency is a legal relationship in which one person, known as the agent, represents another person, known as the principal, in dealings with third parties. In real estate transactions, the principal is typically the buyer or seller, while the agent is the licensed real estate professional representing that client. The purpose of agency is to allow the agent to act on behalf of the client in matters related to the transaction. When an agency relationship exists, the agent has the authority to perform certain tasks, communicate offers, negotiate terms, and assist the client throughout the transaction process. However, agency does not mean that the agent can make decisions without the client's approval. Instead, the agent acts as a representative who helps guide the client through the transaction while following the client's instructions. In practice, agency relationships are most commonly created through written agreements, such as listing agreements or buyer representation agreements. These agreements establish the scope of the agent's authority and outline the duties owed to the client. For example, when a homeowner in Chandler signs a listing agreement with a brokerage, the brokerage and its affiliated licensees become agents of the seller. This relationship establishes fiduciary obligations that require the agent to act in the best interests of the seller throughout the marketing and negotiation process. B. Common law principles. Agency law developed long before modern real estate statutes existed. Much of the legal framework governing agency relationships originated from common law, which refers to legal principles developed through court decisions over time. Courts historically recognized that when one person represents another in a transaction, the representative must act with loyalty, honesty, and care. These principles evolved into the fiduciary duties that continue to define agency relationships today. Common law agency principles emphasize the importance of trust between the agent and the principal. When a client hires a real estate professional to represent them in a transaction, they rely on the agent's expertise and expect the agent to protect their interests. Because of this trust, courts have consistently held that agents must act in good faith and must avoid conflicts of interest that could harm the client. A well-known Arizona case that reinforces the importance of disclosure in real estate transactions is Hill v. Jones, 1986. In that case, the Arizona Court of Appeals held that sellers and their agents must disclose known material defects that could affect the value or desirability of the property. Although the case focused on disclosure obligations, it reflects the broader common law principle that agents must act honestly and protect the interests of the parties they represent. These common law principles continue to influence how agency relationships are interpreted in modern real estate transactions. C. Arizona Statutory Framework. While common law principles provide the foundation for agency relationships, Arizona statutes and administrative rules provide the regulatory framework that governs how real estate licensees operate. Arizona law requires licensees to comply with the professional conduct standards established under ARS Title 32, Chapter 20, which regulates real estate brokers and salespersons. These statutes grant the Arizona Department of Real Estate the authority to license professionals, enforce regulations, and discipline licensees who violate the law. In addition to statutes, the Arizona Administrative Code Title 4, Chapter 28 establishes the Commissioner's rules that govern the conduct of real estate licensees. Rules such as AAC R4 281101 establish professional conduct standards, while AAC R4 281103 requires brokers to supervise licensees and ensure compliance with regulatory requirements. Together, these statutes and rules create a framework that supports the common law principles of agency while providing clear regulatory expectations for licensees. For example, Arizona law requires licensees to disclose material information, exercise reasonable skill and care, and maintain proper documentation throughout the transaction process. These requirements reinforce the fiduciary duties that arise when an agency relationship is formed. D. Fiduciary relationships in real estate. When an agency relationship is created, the agent becomes a fiduciary of the client. A fiduciary is a person who is legally obligated to act in the best interests of another person. In real estate transactions, fiduciary duties require agents to place the client's interests above their own and to avoid actions that could create conflicts of interest. Fiduciary duties typically include obligations such as loyalty, confidentiality, disclosure, obedience to lawful instructions, reasonable care, and accounting for funds or property entrusted to the agent. These duties guide the behavior of agents throughout the transaction process. For example, if a listing agent in Scottsdale receives multiple offers on a property, the agent must present all offers to the seller and provide honest information about the strengths and weaknesses of each offer. The agent cannot withhold offers or manipulate information to benefit another party. Similarly, a buyer's agent representing a client purchasing a home in Gilbert must protect the buyer's negotiating position and avoid disclosing confidential information that could weaken the buyer's ability to negotiate favorable terms. Understanding fiduciary duties helps agents maintain professional integrity while protecting the interests of the clients they represent. Discussion questions. Why does the creation of an agency relationship impose fiduciary duties on a real estate agent? Answer. Because the client relies on the agent's expertise and trust to represent their interests in the transaction, the law requires the agent to act with loyalty, honesty, and care. How do common law principles influence modern real estate agency relationships in Arizona? Answer. Common law principles establish the fiduciary duties of loyalty, disclosure, and care that continue to shape agency relationships even within modern statutory frameworks. Why is it important for real estate agents to understand both Arizona statutes and common law agency principles? Answer. Because real estate transactions are governed by both statutory law and court decisions, and understanding both helps agents operate within legal and professional standards.